Which small city in Brevard has the most big city challenges to overcome? That would have to be Cocoa, which has seen a nice downtown renaissance even as it grapples with crime and decay elsewhere. Today we'll learn more about how this town has confronted its challenges, including the school district's proposed closure of its middle school and the potential loss of community that the city has tried to avoid. My guest is new city manager John Tikanich, hired in April after serving 8 years as Cocoa's community development director. Also coming up in the program, I'll take you on a field trip to North Brevard, where a major landowner has dedicated a record amount of land for nature and conservation in exchange for rights to develop. Is this the next big thing in growth? Stay tuned to find out. Now, here's my interview with Cocoa City Manager John Tikanich. John, one of the most urgent issues that I know you faced as city manager was reacting to some violent crime that happened. I know there was a woman that was murdered in her home near Fisk Boulevard. What's going on?
Well, a couple things. In January, council authorized the unfreezing of 3 additional police officers, and the intent was, as we bring them on board, was to create or reconstitute our street crimes unit. In light of that and a couple other incidents within a week, 10 days, we, working with the police chief, we accelerated the creation of the street crimes unit. It's been on the streets now, I think, for about 10 days, 12 days, and I know they've already made 18 arrests. Wow. Spoke to the police chief this morning, and they are out there very active. Ironically, I was at Good Friday service, and I had somebody come up to me, a resident, and let me know that they've seen the presence, so they've seen the increased presence. We also have our 3 K9 units that are now out on the road as well, and we're just going to take crime very serious in the city of Cocoa. It's just not something we're going to tolerate.
What kind of crime does a street crimes unit respond to or handle versus a normal patrol officer?
Well, I think they can specialize their activities on enforcement of the various nuisance, whether it be drugs, prostitution, just anything that would enable them to kind of combat crime on a proactive basis. I mean, it's rather than just patrolling around, they get the opportunity to have, wide latitude to address, law enforcement issues.
So if they know there's a trend, they know somebody's been making trouble, they can keep an eye on them, they can react, they can investigate a little bit or do whatever it takes.
Correct. They've got a pretty broad, pretty wide, authority in terms of the areas in which they, will direct their efforts.
You were hired in January. Cocoa is a tough job. I mean, as cities go, city manager jobs open up elsewhere all the time. Why did you apply?
Actually, I was fortunate. I've worked for the city now for well over 11 years, and I came here and I started the Office of Economic Development back in 2002. Subsequently became the Community Development Director, have been that for the last 8 years, 8.5 years, and to be quite honest, I'm invested in the community. I helped put together a number of the plans that we've worked on over the last decade, and I'd like to see, I believe there's a lot of opportunities. Clearly Cocoa has challenges, but I think Cocoa has a lot of opportunities, a lot of assets from the people that live there, the Cocoa Village, State Road 524, the Grissom Parkway area, the industrial area, and I just, this is my dream job. I mean, I'm excited about the opportunities. I think we've got a great council. I think I've got an excellent staff, and then to top it off, we have a great business community and enjoy working with the residents.
Are there other cities around Florida or the United States that have the same kind of mix of challenges that Cocoa has that you look to sometimes for ideas or for examples of how they might have tackled something successfully?
Well, I don't want to narrow it down to any specific city, because I think sometimes you can look at how other cities or local governments have handled certain issues, and while they may not be directly similar to Cocoa in terms of size, but I've always said Cocoa is a small city with big city problems. When you look at some of the issues that we have in terms of a high percentage of unemployment, high percentage of poverty, we're the most diverse community in Brevard County, and so I think we have not limited ourselves. I mean, I'm willing to look at, when I go to sometimes a conference or do online research, I'll look at large cities and small cities, and we kind of see what works and then we generally have some ideas. I mean, we're open, you know, in terms of trying to be, you know, creative in trying to deliver municipal services.
One of the issues that the city of Cocoa has weighed in on, wouldn't normally have to, is the issue of school closures. Brevard Public Schools is looking at consolidating clusters of schools in order to make most efficient use of its space. Clear Lake Middle School is slated for closure to be combined with Cocoa High School. There are some other schools in the area that might be up in future years. What's the city's position?
Well, our position from day one has been the ability to retain Cocoa students within the Cocoa feeder chain. And with that, the initial proposal was to close Clear Lake and to bus the students to South Merritt Island and then to Northport St. John. And as a community, you know, if I put my community development hat on and economic development hat, if you don't have a school, there's substantive research out there on the effects on a community as a result of a school closure. If a parent doesn't know that their child can go from, you know, from K through 12, and in our case, would benefit with the BC, you know, Brevard Community College and the UCF, all the way up to a master's program, if it's, you know, there's certain programs they have that are master's level. If they don't know that they can, you know, they have that opportunity, it affects us economically, you know, and as a community, because now you're taking kids, besides the economic development component, there's a social component, you know, kids in the same neighborhood, because they're maybe on one side of the street or the other side, they may go to different schools. So we were genuinely concerned about that. It was a little bit concerning, the process by which it all came about. I still feel the process was flawed. I'm not 100% certain I agree with the data that was used, because there was changes between September, you know, and then the pre-vote, you know, in terms of data that was released in late October, and then after the vote where the tax failed, that would ideally fund to keep the schools open and keep the school board running. But I think what has happened, and I understand that the port recently received advice, an opinion that they're not going to be able to use money to provide assistance to the school board. But, you know, 2 weeks ago I was at a community leaders meeting at Cocoa High School, and they had all the principals from the elementary school, the current principal for Clear Lake Middle, and then Dr. Sullivan with Cocoa High. And Dr. Murray, the school board chairman, was there, as well as a number of business partners and the sheriff's office, our police department, a couple elected officials, and you know, and we had a really good discussion on what we could do, because there are a lot of success stories going on in the Cocoa feeder chain, and that's something that the city is going to continue. And I would say, and I've heard from school board members, that Cocoa has always demonstrated its investment in its Cocoa schools, and to the point where we probably lead in terms of investing and providing support, and we will continue to do that. And because a quality education, nothing will break, you know, generational poverty than a good education and preparing kids, whether they're going to go to college, whether they're going to go to VOTEC, or whatever their career choice might be. We want to make sure they have every opportunity to succeed. And one of the things at this Community Leaders Forum was, or a workshop, they discussed on how they were going to accommodate, you know, the middle school students at Cocoa High. I think myself and others left there feeling very comfortable with what, you know, the school district is seeking to do to accommodate the students and to ensure that they get the education. And they also voted I think it was their last school board meeting, to appropriate the funds necessary.
Okay.
On the initial vote, when they voted to close, they kind of held that, you know, that part of the motion off, and they've brought that back. They've since done that. We're very pleased with that, and we look forward to working with the school district. It's not the ideal situation. Of course, we would like to have Clear Lake Middle, but we think, you know, I guess if I was a middle school student, you know, there's so many programs that you have available at the middle school level. Now when I go to the high school, not only do I have those programs, I also have access to other programs that high school students are currently, you know, able to participate in. So there's a potential that this could really be a win-win for the city, for the school board. The the reuse or repurposing of Clear Lake Middle as an adult education center and alternative learning center, I think is a huge opportunity for the city in terms of for those that maybe for one reason or another decided or by circumstance didn't finish their education. They will now have the ability to go to Cocoa or Clear Lake Middle, or what they're going to, I think they're going to call it Clear Lake Community School, and have the opportunity to do that, whether it be GED or career educational training, vocational training. So those are some unique, I guess, it's with every challenge there's an opportunity, and we're just trying to now work with the school district, work with Cocoa High, and make this the best opportunity available for the city and specifically our students.
We'll have more of my interview with Cocoa manager John Takanich in just a moment. Now, let's pay a visit to Farmton, the 94 square miles of scrub, timber, and wetlands straddling Brevard and Volusia counties. The owners just signed over more than 40,000 acres for conservation to the counties, Florida Audubon, and the St. Johns River Water Management District. My team and I talked with the Miami Corporation's attorney on the banks of Deep Creek, which meanders through the land. Take a look. Glenn, the Farmton property is notable in the sense that you're about to set aside so much of it for conservation compared to development. Give us a sense of how much will be set aside for that.
Well, the Farmton tract is actually 59,000 acres. That equates to about 94 square miles of property owned by Miami Corporation or the Deering family. We're putting 75%, at least 75% of that property into conservation. We have 11,500 acres in Brevard County. And of that 11,500 acres, we are clustering all the development into less than 2,500 acres.
Okay.
The rest of it's being put into conservation. And so within that 2,500 acre area, we're calling them sustainable development areas. That's where any of the development will take place. And in Brevard, we're looking at more economic development than residential development.
You're not the developers, though, right? You're the landowners.
Absolutely not. Miami Corporation has owned this property since 1926. They love this property. They want to make sure that it's preserved or developed properly, and they've been working with the governments to make sure of that, but they are not developers.
Development at Farmton could begin within 5 years, but is expected to happen over the next 50. Eventually, the 11,500 acres in Brevard will include a pocket of 2,306 homes and more than 1 million square feet of commercial, office, and industrial space. Now, let's hear more about development and other issues in Cocoa. We recently profiled a project that's going on right in the Diamond Square area of Cocoa, one of the older, poorer parts of town. A charter school principal is looking to renovate portions of the old Monroe segregated high school that has been shut for some time into a new charter school, the Emma Jewell Charter School. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that project?
We're excited about it. Mr. Cole, he is very dynamic, very enthusiastic. He's a principal. He's an educator by trade, and he sees it as an opportunity to give back to the community where he was raised. And we are supporting that project. We have, through our CDBG program, designated block grant program. It is a project that we are supporting, and we are working with him, and he's actually involved in our Diamond Square redevelopment planning effort, because we see him as that could be a huge catalyst for an area that is underserved and that has struggled with systemic issues of poverty and things of that like. And so we are excited about that, and we fully support Mr. Cole, and we look forward to, when he opens the doors and students can go, attend and receive a quality education.
I want to ask you about your legislative agenda this year. Everybody has a chance to talk to our local lawmakers and try to get a few things passed or not in the legislature. One of the things that you're seeking is a grant for the Cocoa Village Playhouse. Explain that.
Well, the Cocoa Village Playhouse, it's a historic structure. It's owned by the city and the Cocoa Village Board of Trustees. We work together. We have a municipal services agreement, and we've undertaken some improvements when it was transferred from the college to the city, and now we're looking to make some additional improvements that would enhance the use of it. I mean, that is a huge economic generator for the city of Cocoa, actually for the region, for Brevard County. They have patrons that come from, you know, throughout the region. Even people that are visiting come and visit. It has an excellent reputation. They recently had a production. I think it was
Build Me Up Buttercup.
Build Me Up Butter.
I went and
yes.
saw that and sat in the nosebleed section at the very top, and I gotta tell you, up there, not only was it packed, but the facility was beautiful inside, and it was a great production.
I mean, we're excited about it, and we applied for a cultural facilities grant, and subject to funding availability at the state level, I believe out of 24 projects, I think we ranked number 9. So we're very hopeful that the legislature will see the benefit that this brings to not just the state, but you know, not just our community, but the state as a whole and our region. They bring in 50,000 plus, you know, patrons a year, to their shows, and they spend money. You know, they go to dinner, they window shop, and so I mean, again, the Cocoa Village Playhouse, what Dr. Hawkins and the board has done is just phenomenal, and it's a huge asset for the city of Cocoa.
Not to be too light about things, but when you go out to eat in Cocoa or Cocoa Village, what are some of your favorite places?
Love Thai Thai. We eat Ryan's a lot. Murdoch's. Then there's every now and then we do the Beef O'Brady's up on 524. I think those are probably I have a 6.5-month-old, so you got to kind of be.
You got to go someplace where they can tolerate a little noise.
My wife and I love Black Tulip as well. It's.
So a couple places you can go and take in the show as well.
Yes.
Another thing that you're looking for in the legislature is to rename State Road 524 Martin Luther King Boulevard. Any status?
Well, I have. I know there was some concerns by some residents, and I think we last communicated. It was actually State Road 524 and 501A, which is Clear Lake Road, and we have expressed. Council did. If there was not support to look at the alternate, and I think we have expressed through our lobbyists that we would like to see not renamed but designated a memorial highway, so there would be no cost to the businesses, no change of address.
I see. Okay.
So it'd be a memorial highway designation. As you know, the city of Cocoa could be arguably the epicenter of the civil rights movement in Brevard County. Through the efforts of the Moores, Dr. Wells, it's report. Your paper did a story not too long ago, and I did not know, but it's reported that Dr. King, kind of, it wasn't well publicized, but had to stay over in Cocoa. So we certainly would like to honor the contributions that Dr. King not just afforded to our residents and but to all generations. Of all races.
There's also a bill that has to do with brownfields. Senator Thad Altman from Viera, Republican, is looking to reform, I suppose, how and what kinds of projects get that designations. What's up with that? Do you support it, or are you concerned?
In full disclosure, I currently am the president of the Florida Brownfields Association.
Okay.
So I'm very, I'd like to think I'm very versed and knowledgeable on this. Yes, we are working, the Florida Brownfields Association, but even the city, it's a concern for us because we have 2 brownfields area.
And what is a brownfield?
A brownfield is it's property that could be complicated, by the presence of contamination or even just the stigma. If the perception of contamination.
Industrial
decay. Yeah, old, vacant, abandoned, underutilized, commercial, industrial uses. And the one bill that Senator Altman is sponsoring seeks to clarify the designation process. There was also a component to deal with third-party liability claims. And then there's another component which I understand is not getting much traction to clarify a tax credit that was available for the development of affordable housing. There is another bill out there in the Senate that certainly has us as a city concerned, because it would limit the application of certain incentives to only those sites on which somebody comes in and they voluntarily acquire property, enter into an agreement with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection called the Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Agreement. You'd only be able to access those incentives if you have that agreement and then those abutting properties. The problem that I see with that, and I'm certainly hopeful, I mean, I know Senator Gardner's office has been working with our lobbyists and our Legislative Policy Committee from the FBA side, and I know our lobbyists with the city has been communicating as well. But the problem that I see is, I think you need to look at the criteria and make sure that local governments in general, that the criteria are clearly delineated and tightened up, in terms of designated in an area. Because, and while I don't know if there's any specific areas here in Brevard, I know of other areas in the state that have drawn or highlighted the concern that where maybe a greenfield site, a site that's never been developed, raw land, gets brownfield designation for the purposes of receiving the incentive, specifically the brownfields redevelopment bonus, which is related to job creation, $2,500 per job created. And that clearly was never the intent of the Brownfields program when it was first enacted. But I can tell you it's a vital tool for, Melbourne has them, Titusville, Rockledge, the county recently designated some areas. I mean, because there are certain areas, whether there's contamination, and we have two right now that we're working on, that have contamination, and these people, they're coming in, they're voluntarily buying this property, and they're agreeing to clean up the property, remediate it, and then redevelop it. One in the Diamond Square redevelopment area, one kind of in the fringe and near, in close to Cocoa Village. So it just, the Brownfields program I felt was an equalizer, an economic development tool that it promoted economic development and promoted sound environmental policy. And it's a voluntary program. And I think it's critical for municipal governments or local governments to have that tool to address those properties, because otherwise, put yourself in a developer's shoes. If I'm going to look for a site to develop my project, okay, and I have two sites that somebody has identified, and one, I know there's nothing there. I can go, get in, not have to go through any regulatory issues. I can just go develop, other than doing your normal due diligence and your land use approvals. But then there's another site that I have to work with, get a designation, work with FDEP, get an agreement signed off on. I got to do cleanup.
Remove an underground tank.
Correct. Or there is a property in close proximity, and unfortunately, contamination just doesn't, stay in one location. It typically migrates. I can think of two sites, and they are right next to each other, where there is petroleum contamination on one corner, and on the other corner, there's contamination. There's chemicals from an old dry cleaner, and that is next door. So you got one property that has two contaminants. Well, there's multiple contaminants, but those are the primary contaminants. But one is related to the old service station, but the other one's from a use next door. So I mean, contamination is not limited to the boundaries. It doesn't know what a boundary of a property line is or the abutting properties. It can extend beyond that. So it's certainly a tool, and it's a concern for the city, because we do have an active brownfields program. We are a 3-time EPA brownfield grantee, and certainly hopeful in the next 60, 90 days we'll get word that our application that's in right now will be successful. Because we go out and we assess properties and try to, while we're not a developer, we try to kind of have an inventory, and and those that we know might be contaminated, there's opportunities to apply for cleanup grants. And we're trying to do the environmentally responsible thing while at the same time advancing economic development to bring in uses that would be the highest and best use and be the most productive use for the community.
Sounds like the bill is sort of aimed at getting this city out of the process and leaving it between the property owner and just the Department of Environmental Protection.
Well, no, actually, I think both bills deal with local government designation.
Okay.
Senator Altman's bill is a bill that, again, in large part, my position with the Florida Brownfields Association, We worked with Senator Altman's office and also Representative Hudson in the House. Senator Gardner, there has just been a lot of attention on economic development incentives, and either, you know, people could argue the use or misuse, abuse of them and the applicability, and I think we have fallen into that discussion. And so I just hope that at the end of the day, you know, we trust that, you know, Senator Gardner and the Senate and Senator Altman, and he does a great job representing Brevard County. But I just hope at the end of the day that rational minds prevail and we get good legislation that, you know, protects the integrity of the program, but also enables it to do what it was designed to do and help us clean up and redevelop these sites that are just, you know, are plaguing our communities.
We just have about a minute left. John Tukanich, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, that's our program. Remember, you can send us your comments on anything you saw today or read in Florida Today. Just turn your cell phone camera around, turn it towards you, and give us your best take on the issue in 30 seconds or less. Then email that clip to letters@floridatoday.com. I'm Matt Reed. We'll see you right here next week on WBCC and FloridaToday.com.